This is Ranger Kidwell-Ross, editor of worldsweeper.com and the director of the World Sweeping Association. Today, in kind of an unusual Zoom conference, I will be giving a presentation along with a longtime associate and well-known figure in the power sweeping industry, Roger Sutherland. Roger is a senior resource engineer, water resources, with 47 years of professional engineering experience in watershed and stormwater management planning, water quality planning, and BMP design. Roger is a recognized international expert in urban stormwater load modeling and the use of street sweeping, catch basin cleaning, and end-of-the-pipe treatment practices needed to remove pollutants from urban runoff. He is the principal author of a state-of-the-art urban stormwater quality modeling package called SIMPTM, which has been used on numerous projects. Roger Sutherland has presented at conferences and short courses on the topics of urban hydrology, hydraulics, and watershed quality, water quality, well over 100 times since 1975. He has lectured 17 times from 1990 through 2003 as a faculty member at a BMP short course sponsored by the University of Wisconsin, and has presented 2 webinars through Forrester University discussing both street sweeping and street dirt. I might add that Roger and I have done a stormwater information seminar in Northern California and Southern California together, and that went, I must say, very well. Our informational conference today, as you see, is entitled Street Sweeping, Clearly America's First Line of Defense for Stormwater Pollution Runoff Abatement. You'll see that Roger is the principal and the engineer at Cascade Water Resources, and I am going to let him take it away at this point. He will be responsible for the first part of our Zoom presentation. So, Roger, you're up.
Thank you, Ranger. Before I get started, I do want to share with the audience how we originally met. I remember it quite well. It was 1994, and it was the American Public Works Association's National Conference in Chicago, Illinois. And the reason why the date sticks in my mind is was the 25th anniversary of a very important initial study done on stormwater quality by the APWA. I gave a presentation on an operation called Tandem sweeping. We'll talk a little bit about that. And after I finished, this gentleman comes walking up to me, and he waited quite some time to be able to talk to me. And he simply introduced himself. He was with American Sweeper at the time, and he said, let me ask you a question. Are you planning to write a paper about the topic that you just presented? And I said, no, I'm really too busy. It was a study I just completed. And he said, well, I don't know if you would have a problem with this, but I've recorded your presentation. And can I write that paper for you? And then you send it to you and you edit it. And I said, well, this isn't a relationship that's going to last a very long time. And that's exactly what happened. And we've been working together with each other ever since. And I think the key here is that we both really have a passion for the topic of power street sweeping. I'm coming from a more technical point of view, and Ranger, with his experience and everything else, is certainly much more practical and down to earth in terms of its true value, as he'll talk about in his portion of the presentation. So with that, let's get started. In the beginning, street sweeping was invented mostly to pick up horse poop and similar waste products. So the emphasis was on cosmetic results and not necessarily water quality. However, when you think about it, if you were living in Chicago, for example, where I think this photograph was taken, around the turn of the 20th century, and you saw that contraption moving down the street, I think you would be pretty happy about it. So starting back in the early 1980s, the US EPA conducted a series, or funded a series of tests conducted by many other participants. In fact, there was 30 of them, of various BMPs that could be utilized to remove pollutants from stormwater, which was the rage that had just occurred as a result of the Clean Water Act's passage in 1972. So early on, NERP, the Nationwide Urban Runoff Program, studied the effectiveness of street sweepers in reducing event mean concentrations for 5 different pollutants at 10 different sites located in 4 states. And it was unexplainable negative results from 2 sites in North Carolina and 1 in Wisconsin that resulted in the conclusion, and I quote, "Street sweeping is generally ineffective as a technique for improving the quality of urban runoff." This conclusion occurred despite the fact that the data showed EMC decreases in 34 of the 50 site pollutant investigations. And, you know, statistically indeterminate results have hampered street sweeping's perceived BMP value for stormwater runoff pollution control ever since. So let's talk about what's changed. Let's talk about the good news. The good news is that today's mechanical advanced street broom sweepers, unlike the ones that were tested in the early 80s, offer much better particulate material pickup, including small micron pickup. In fact, in 2008, I was hired by the Elgin Sweeper Company, and I performed performance testing on a number of their models at the time. And I tested the Elgin Eagle, pictured here in this slide, and it showed a mass pickup efficiency for particles 250 microns or less to be about 86%, which is much, much greater than the NERP area sweepers. They probably didn't pick up more than 10% tops. Testing results in the tests we conducted also showed that the use of water, which is quite common to knock down dust, to deal with fugitive dust, actually resulted in a 20% reduction in efficiency, which obviously went down to something around 70%. So the better news is that today's modern air sweepers, now air sweepers are regenerative air or vacuum machines, have vastly increased the ability of sweepers to pick up pollutants and remove them from stormwater. In fact, the same effort that I mentioned in our tests of the Elgin Crosswind, which is their premier regenerative air machine and also pictured in the slide here, they were able to achieve 90 to 95% pickup in the under 250 micron range. And the reason we have a tendency to focus on this range is that this is by far the most bioavailable and mobile fraction of all the debris sizes. However, what many people perhaps aren't aware of is perhaps really the best news. And that is what I was mentioning in the introduction, was a tandem operation. A tandem operation is simply a mechanical broom sweeper followed immediately by an air sweeper. And we believe that this operation may prove to be the most effective pickup performance you can achieve. In 1994, as I mentioned previously, I did a study and reported on it at APWA in Chicago. And that study was to monitor the pickup performance of a monthly tandem sweeping operation, and I used before and after street dirt sampling, against that of a standard mechanical only operation. We did this over a 6-month period, and we found that on the average, the pickup of particulate material, street dirt, if you will, from the tandem operation was 74% versus approximately 40% for the standalone broom operation. So you see, these results help to explain the 16 site pollutant NERP investigations that found higher pollutant concentrations after we were aggressively broom sweeping, actually twice a week. Because as the broom sweepers of that era, as I mentioned previously, only removed the much larger material. Therefore, they exposed this fine material, which was easy picking for the storms that followed. In fact, a tandem operation has the greater capacity to remove fine particles, less than 250 microns. And as a result, the concentration of pollutants washed off in the storms that follow will be lower. And we did a little bit of a cost analysis, and we found that, at least in the year 1994, that it was the most cost-effective operation. So the question is whether that's still the case when we're dealing with these modern day sweepers, which you know now have much greater opportunity to pick up material. So moving along, let's talk about some of the studies that have been done about street sweeping. We don't have much time, and I'm only going to focus on a couple. In 2009, the city of Seattle, which, by the way, largely abandoned their street sweeping following the conclusions of the NERP, which so many other communities did throughout the country, they conducted a pilot study. I was involved in that study. I did the initial scoping of the work, and I also was involved in training the personnel in the street dirt collection procedures and that sort of thing. But I wasn't involved in the actual work itself or the conclusions that were drawn. And what it found was that the work suggested that a stormwater pollutant runoff approach could significantly increase the massive pollutant removal from stormwater. And in fact, when Seattle enacted their sweeping as an adjunct to their existing end-of-the-pipe solutions, they were also doing catch basin cleaning in 2011, they determined that over a 2-year period, they increased the amount of pollutants being removed from stormwater by over 300%. Further study made them realize that they needed to double their budget for sweeping, and they have done that. Now, for many, many decades, and you can find the results of this work on Ranger's webpage, I did model studies with the model SIMPTM, or symptom as you might want to call it. And that really kept on consistently showing that street sweeping, well-maintained machines, street sweeping, reasonable frequencies, was able to reduce pollutant concentrations. I was pretty much ridiculed for the kinds of reductions that I was projecting. And unfortunately, maybe up to this point in time, there was really no definitive data that suggests that's the case, because no one thought about, well, what if we collect the water as it's leaving the gutter and is going directly into the catch basin? So in 2010, the city of San Diego, in their targeted aggressive street sweeping pilot study, did just that. And this table shows the results of the 3 storms that they sampled taking the samples as the water poured into the catch basin, using both an mechanical sweeper, and then the other area was just, swept by a vacuum, and that was against an unswept area. And you can see the results of the work, and that's, by the way, that's measured EMCs. So TSS was reduced by 74% by the mechanical sweeping, 85% by vacuum sweeping, And the reduction for metals ranged anywhere from 56 to 60 for mechanical and up to 83% for vacuum. So this was the first time, to my knowledge, that we had definitive proof that what I had been simulating, projecting, and doing for several decades by this point in time was in fact valid. Now, let's fast forward to today, or in this case, it would be 2019. 2019, the University of Florida released the final of 3 documents that they published over a period of 12 years, documenting studies that they conducted in association with up to 14 Florida MS4s and in association with the Florida Stormwater Association. And then what they found was street sweeping was the best BMP. That's up to 7 times more cost effective than any other BMP that you could possibly use for the removal of total nitrogen and total phosphorus from stormwater. The studies measured the amount of material captured by the complete range of all available BMPs, from sweeping to catch basin cleaning to a variety of structural end-of-the-pipe measures. And they calculated, each of the MS4s calculated very meticulously what the cost of capturing a pound of nitrogen or a pound of phosphorus was for each of the BMP recovery method. And street sweeping was the lowest cost per pound. Catch basin was second in all instances. Now let's look at some of these numbers because they're pretty impressive. Here we have the relative cost of removing total nitrogen, $180 a pound. That's street sweeping. Catch basin cleaning is $1,160 and change. And this is basically the average cost, or excuse me, the median cost of all of the best management practices that you could possibly undertake. I think it's the median, it could be the mean, I'll have to check that, but my bad. In any case, look at that number, 2,173. Now let's go on to phosphorus. So phosphorus, which obviously seems to be more of interest to more communities throughout the nation, it was $294 a pound, catch basin cleaning $18.94, and I think that is a mean of the best management practices that they did investigate, and I believe there was 4 of them, end of the pipe solutions, if you will, $12,000. And one final comment on this effort is the data that they collected did not differentiate between a broom and an air sweeper. And we've advised Dr. John Sansaloni, who Ranger interviewed about this project last December or January in his World Sweeper. We told him that if he were to separate those 2 databases, he's liable to find that the air sweeper will have done even a better job than the broom, but we don't know until he does that. So let's look at the conclusions of this, what I call game-changing study. The recovery of particulate material matters. And this study basically proved that street dirt pickup recovery also matters. The Florida studies found street sweeping to be the most economic and dominant practice that MS4s could implement and optimize in order to maximize nutrient and particulate material recovery benefits to urban drainage systems and the receiving waters they discharge to. The study showed conclusively that the recovery of particulate material matters. The more PM an MS4 recovers, the more the pollutants are reduced. In fact, this sentence says it all. The study results are statistically defensible at 95% confidence interval when combining all 14 MS4s for PM, TN, and TP. So the final slide in my present portion of the presentation I want to talk about how a street sweeping program can increase its ability to collect this contaminated material and to collect it more effectively. There are a number of things that a program can do. And let's just spend a few minutes talking about these. Number one, we talked a little bit about the type of sweeper and the operation used. Particulate pickup performance is important, and well-maintained air machines appear to be a little bit more effective than well-maintained mechanical ones. However, tandem operations that I talked about may in fact prove to be the most cost-effective. And I'm thinking about more specialty pollutants like PAHs, things that are highly associated with the very fines. These are toxic pollutants that have an affinity for attaching themselves to fine material. We don't know the answer to this question. We're just looking for someone that's willing to hire us to, or help them understand what they need to do to figure it out. The second thing, and this is very important, is the forward speed of a sweeper. Now, your street sweeping manufacturers are generally going to recommend that you sweep between 3 and 6 miles per hour, especially for heavy accumulations. However, I've conducted numerous studies that have shown that sweeping in the 8 to 10 mile per hour range only reduces pickup performance by 10 to 15%. And your program ends up sweeping way more miles in a sweeping shift, thus removing more particulates and associated pollutants. Let's talk about frequency of street cleaning. Usually varies by land use or street types. The most popular choices are weekly, bi-monthly, and monthly. Frequency actually should vary by street dirt accumulation, with the quickest and highest accumulating streets receiving the most frequent cleaning. And here's something that you should take a note of. Daily or bi-weekly sweeping of downtown commercial business districts is a waste of financial resources. If you're trying to maximize the particulate material collection, which should be the primary sweeping objective now, based on the work of the University of Florida. And finally, let's talk about the one that holds the greatest promise. Mandatory removal of parked cars during sweeping could increase pickup by 30 to 60%, depending on parking density. And, you know, you have to make it mandatory. You have to have regulations. You have to ticket cars. That's just part of the program. That's what makes it work. And the fines that these can generate can offset a great portion of the cost of implementing and operating a vehicle removal program. So this action likely remains the most cost-effective one that will significantly increase PM pickup for the lowest cost expenditure. Now with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ranger, who, if you're viewing this as a link off of the World Sweeper newsletter, then I think you know Ranger Kidwell-Ross. And for those that might not be aware of his credential, I just say a couple of words about him. He's a graduate level economist and the world's most published author on the topic of power sweeping. In the early 1990s, he founded the first US industry sweeping magazine called American Sweeper, and today he owns and is the editor of the largest resource for power sweeping in the world, the multi-award-winning website, worldsweeper.com. Ranger, as he mentioned earlier, is also the founder and the executive director of the World Sweeping Association and was the first person from the power sweeping industry to be inducted into the Pavement Hall of Fame, something I guess I still have to aspire for. So with that, Ranger, you can take it away.
Well, thanks a lot, Roger. Yes, Roger and I really have enjoyed working together through the years. He's a very diligent engineer in coming up with what the studies should be and then in implementing them. And we've also had a number of conversations that run deep into the night about the arcane aspects of sweeping. So let me talk about the plus and minus of sweeping. The disadvantages that are often discussed, of course, is the cost of sweepers and how much they cost to operate and maintain. Kind of anecdotally, people that don't know much about sweeping or what I do for a living say, well, gee, what's a sweeper? And I say they're a machine that breaks all the time. And that's not strictly speaking true, but there's certainly a grain of truth in it. And so there is a cost of operation and maintenance, but it turns out that those costs, when you put them up against things like catch basin, end of the pipe issues, it's a lot less expensive. People don't like to move their vehicles. There's a natural resistance to having to remove your vehicles, and we'll get to that a little more down the line. And although you can't generally operate during freezing weather, there are some models out there now that claim to be water-free, and there's some different additives you can put into water that allow the sweeper to operate below freezing, although once you get down in the 20s, it gets to be trouble. So the advantages, as the headline says, far outweigh. There's no real estate or dislocation cost to property owners with this particular method. You don't have an infrastructure. There's no grassy swales or settling ponds or even catch basins that you have to develop or maintain. You don't have to check on filters and so forth. And now, most definitively with the University of Florida test results, we know that sweeping is the most effective and costs the least. So let's talk about some ways to enhance the value of street sweeping to your community. It's really important that the software is out there. Roger Sutherland's SIMPTM software can really accurately model your pollutant removal, and that it's much more expensive to try to run paired basin studies. The software models given rainfall over the different years and models the wash off, and it can really be a cost-saving way to find out what you should be doing in your area to hit your stormwater goals. You can, at that point, then you can allocate your sweeping program resources to put the right sweepers in the right places at the right times. And one of the tips that I push to public works directors when I talk to them and when we do seminars is add your sweeping department to your stormwater department in order to maximize the efficiency of both of those. Now, these days, there are ways and methodologies to get money for the stormwater departments. Usually, this is a surcharge on garbage pickup. So what we hear all too often is, yes, we're throwing all this money at our stormwater pollution removal. And then when you say, well, how about sweeping? They say, well, sweeping's expensive, and so we do that as much as we can. The actual fact of that is sweeping is, as Roger already alluded to, up to 7 times less expensive if you're going to be sweeping for water quality. Obviously, if you sweep once a year, you're going to pick up a lot more material per mile than if you sweep, say, once a day. So what you really should be doing is allocating your stormwater and sweeping department money all in a big pot, and then figure out what it costs per pound to pick up the pollutants by a sweeping, and start with that. And then when the cost of your last pound of pollutant that you're targeting with a sweeper reaches the amount that is really the first pound of pollutant picked up by, for example, your catch basins and cleaning or filtration, that sort of thing, then that's when you stay at that sweeping frequency and move over to more catch basins and whatever else you need to do to achieve your goals. It's really important to figure out what the mix of air and broom sweepers you should be using. Develop specific goals in order to maximize your sweeper fleet. One of the things that we have seen over time is that cities have a need for mechanical broom sweepers for their, in the snow belts for their cleanup in the spring. And so because that's something they want to do as fast as they can, oftentimes they have mechanical broom sweepers and then they keep using those in their cities. And that's just something that is not going to maximize your capabilities, because broom sweepers are not as efficient at picking up this small micron debris. And for reasons of physics, that's where the pollutants tend to be, is in small micron particles. If you have porous pavement, vacuum sweepers in the realm of sweeping is the best. You don't want to use regenerative air, and certainly not broom, but regenerative air even is not typically as good an option for porous pavement, and you don't want to use water either. And then for general city street sweeping, regenerative air sweepers are the way to go. And it's just, we've seen that they provide the best pickup of small micron debris as well as regular debris. And let's talk about some other aspects of sweeping. Now, some cities, but not many, have implemented some kind of value-added system with their sweeping. And what this particular one shows you is you can put a trackpad, a key pad onto a sweeper chassis and educate your sweeper operators. But it can all be linked via GPS. So the online, so that, as you can see, let's number 3, if you push number 3, the operator does that. That's where he noticed that there was a sign down, and you'd send that to the sign put back up department. If you had low-hanging branches, let's say that's a number 6, he pushes the number 6, GPS shows where that sweeper is at that particular point, and that notice goes to the department that's in charge of, going out and tree trimming. And potholes, number 9, would go to Department C. It's easy to have up to 10 different designations that you can have that can go to 10 different departments if that's what you wanted. And I also recommend that you put graphics onto your sweeper so that you can talk about your civic goals, talk about what sweeping does. Have, for example, modules that go into your classes, 5th grade's often one that's chosen, that, they learn about stormwater, they learn about what sweepers do. You can have touch a truck events and along the same lines to alert kids as to what those machines are, and then have them have an art contest with the winners having their graphics go on the side of your sweeper. And once you do that, and make sure that your residents know about the health and safety benefits that sweeping offers, you'll find that your citizens will be much more obliging with moving their cars, but they'll be proud that their city is involved to, keep the residents, as it says they're healthy, safe, and with clean water. This kind of education is really important to reduce any kind of friction with your citizenry. Teach your city on your website and so forth with handouts about the value of pollution removal with street sweeping. With these touch a truck events, don't just have them touching the trucks and crawling all over them, but be sure to have handouts that talk about what kind of value sweeping offers for pollutant removal, keeping the fish alive, and that sort of thing. And always make sure to have good information online and have that information on your handouts. And then having grade-specific education in schools is a way to develop adults that will have those same kinds of values. Now, one of the things that is often not thought about when people say, well, gee, I don't want to move my car. It's just my car. It's just one car. What kind of problem is that? Well, one parked car is 3 spaces because the sweeper has to go out around the car and then come back in once it has gone around the car. And so if you have just a couple, 3 cars per block, that whole block could end up not getting swept. And then once the cars move, you see, not only unsightly areas, but it's unhealthy. It's a rodent attraction problem. It can be slip and fall issues and so forth. So if you want to maximize removal of your pollution and debris and cosmetically as well to make your city look as nice as it can while you meet your water quality goals, move your vehicles out of the way of the sweepers. And the good news is that debris removal from sweepers is by far the least expensive way to keep your pavement looking good. This is a quote from Dr. Sansaloni, who was the principal investigator for the study that we cited. You can see the source there on the website, on my World Sweeper website. So I encourage you to check that study out. And I'm going to read it because I think it's a very important quote. With conventional BMPs, particulate matter removal costs dollars per pound, anywhere from $4 to $41. And they found that with street sweeping, the cost of removing a pound of particulate matter was 10 cents. And that's on top of the fact that removing phosphorus and nitrogen was nearly 7 times more cost effective. And as Dr. Sansaloni said, that's really the only thing people need to know. Now, for your sweeping program, we really recommend that you develop as best you can a citizen-friendly car removal program. More good news. There are technological advances today can offer some very improved outcomes. Internet apps are one of the things that really can be a game changer for your sweeper program. You can have apps developed that are like Uber. For anyone out there that's used Uber or Lyft, then you know what that contrast is while you're waiting for your ride compared to what it was like with a cab. There's no reason that you can't have an Uber-like app that can show where your sweepers are. Your citizens can log on to the app, log on to the city database that has their sweeping route on it, and then have it set up where they can say, well, here's what I want for reminders. I want to get a text message the day before the sweeper is going to be coming. Now, I also want a text message, let's say, when the sweeper's a mile away. And then I want another text message when the sweeper has gone by. Now, one of the things that we're in right now as this conference is being conducted is a pandemic. And when this pandemic started, there were about 5% of people that were working from home. And it's estimated that by mid-2021, that number is going to be about 30% of people working from home. That means there's many fewer places to go move your car. Whereas if you have this Uber-like app developed for your city, and that's something we can help with, then somebody that's working at home can see the sweepers coming. Okay, they bundle their kids up, put them in the car, off they go to go shop and get some groceries for an hour, and then come back. And when they get a notice that the sweeper's gone by. Now, today, unfortunately, most sweeping programs are 4-hour car removal. That's another problem. We see many, many times in the information that I receive as editor of World Sweeper about street sweeping are complaints on social media about, oh, I moved my car and then the sweeper didn't even come by. And so now what do? Or I moved my car and the sweeper went by and I moved my car back and I got a ticket. Well, let's talk about some more technology that you can streamline your program ticketing. It costs you a significant amount of money to involve your parking enforcement people with giving out these tickets. And your people that live there are not very happy about having to move their car for 4 hours. Let's ticket via cameras put on sweepers. That way, you don't have to have parking enforcement get involved. If and the people can move their car back once the sweeper's gone by with no problem. If your car's in the way when the sweeper comes by, it takes a picture of your license plate, you get a ticket. And as Roger mentioned, tickets will definitely pay for a significant portion of your sweeping program costs. Now, let's just recap here that we all want a BMP outcome, the best management practice for our city. We'll look better and we'll have better results. So here are the questions that you need to ask when you put together your sweeping program. How can you remind your people about moving their cars? What's the best way to do that? How can the city notify you if changes occur? That's another social media large-scale complaint that the sweeper broke down. They didn't come by, and I moved my car. They're unhappy about that. So when that occurs, figure out how to notify them in that Uber type app, as an example, that sweeper is not going to be coming by as was planned. And also let them know how to tell whether their street has been swept. Again, the app could really take it a long ways to do that. And as it can with number 4, ensuring that somebody in your town in the residential neighborhood won't get a ticket if they move their car back after the sweeper goes by, but before the 4 hours goes past. When you implement your program, remember that the pushback from your citizens is absolutely minimized through education process. That makes a huge difference. Everybody talks about the environment these days, and this is something that really does contribute to a better environment and is becoming increasingly important as climate change comes to bear. Make sure you have a real-time notification when you have schedule changes, allow immediate reparking, and coordinate your ticket writers with sweepers, not a 4-hour or some other window. And right now, just to allude to the Dr. Sansaloni study that was conducted through his relationship with the University of Florida, but it was also sanctioned by the state of Florida and the Florida Stormwater Association. Dr. Sansaloni told me that these cities that, now that this study has come out, the cities there have received tens of millions of dollars of credit from the state based on the amount of pollutants that they are removing. And you can imagine that if they're getting money for the pounds of pollutants that are being removed, and the state has realized that for every pound of sweeping debris, then you get this much nitrogen, this much phosphorus, and for a pound of catch basin material, you get 1/7 of that, or then what are they going to do? They're going to sweep more because they now are being recognized that that there is a completely bigger difference when you're sweeping rather than doing some of the other end of the pipe solutions. So as extra credit, work to enact regulations in your state, like the ones in Florida, so sweeping gets appropriately credited for pollutant removal. And to give yourself strength in that process, because as we all know, anything important doesn't come easily. Be guided by your knowledge that street sweeping is the first line of defense for pavement-based pollutant removal. So that's my portion of the presentation as well. I hope that you find this to be informative. And if you have questions, we'll put a slide up here at the end that provides the contact information for both Roger and myself. And we stand ready to become involved, as we already have been together on with some projects in major cities in the U.S. And both Roger and I have traveled around the world, taught sweeping. Roger has conducted studies. I recall in Israel for one. We're also available for helping countries other than the United States. So, Roger, do you have anything you'd like to add here at the end of our presentation?
No, I don't have anything new to add. I think you did a really nice job of making people understand that street sweeping, it makes sense. It made sense in 1973 when I started my master's work at the University of Maryland. It made sense in the decades that followed. And with the work, the game-changing efforts of the University of Florida, we have the proof that we've always desired to have, that street sweeping is the first line of defense. And your job as a corporation that can assist, as a city or a community that has a street sweeping program, is to maximize that street sweeping program to the maximum extent possible with the dollars you have to expend, and then see how your water quality is then and go from there. So that's it for me. Thank you, Ranger.
All right, thank you, everybody. And if you have questions, then here's who to call.